Well, good morning. We're gathered here today on the traditional territory of Treaty 6, and I also want to acknowledge the Métis people who share a deep connection to this land. I'm joined here today by Alberta NDP candidate for Edmonton-Decore Sharif Haji, and our candidate for Edmonton-South, Rhiannon Hoyle, and of course by our leader, Rachel Notley. I want to thank everyone for joining us here today, and to Kafa Roastery and Studio, one of the many incredible Black-owned businesses here in Edmonton, for hosting us in this incredible space. Anyone who knows me knows I love coffee. I can't wait to get a cup and take home some beans. We're here today because tomorrow marks the beginning of Black History Month, an initiative, the recognition of which we began in Alberta under our Alberta NDP government. Black History Month is a reminder to all Albertans about the achievements of the Black community here in our province, across the country, and the significance of Black futures as we continue to make history right now. In fact, the current impact of Black futures continues to grow significantly in our province, as newcomers from Africa are now one of the largest immigrant groups moving to Alberta. We're seeing growing communities of Black Albertans across our province, and particularly in Calgary. As the communities grow and support one another, it creates more opportunities for Black Albertans to succeed and stay here in Alberta. To continue building on that success, we must improve on the systems that we have in place to support newcomers to our province and help racialized Albertans thrive. Over the last few years, as conversations and anti-racism protests have arisen across the world and here at home, we in the Alberta NDP have made a commitment to the Black community and all racialized Albertans that we would embark on work to develop solutions. Solutions for combating racism and discrimination, and to create positive systemic change that promotes inclusion in our public safety, in economic participation, in education, and more. We had important discussions with over 600 Albertans representing numerous communities, organizations, and associations, and started to create a roadmap on how we can start to address issues of systemic racism. Because we know that systemic and structural racism exists. The experience of all forms of racism and discrimination, both subtle and overt, is an everyday occurrence for many Albertans. So the focus of these important discussions led us to identify how to start implementing processes to recognize and monitor racial disparities in our institutions and in all areas of provincial government policy. Policies, practices, and procedures that might appear neutral on paper can create a disadvantage, even real harm for racialized Albertans in practice. Collecting data will help us understand where we need to start, where those gaps exist, and where the system is failing racialized Albertans. That was a key recommendation from the Alberta Anti-Racism Advisory Council's report that they issued in 2020, which is the collection of disaggregated race-based data. I'm very proud to have had the opportunity last year to bring forward a private member's bill to make a start on that work. And it was very disappointing that the UCP government chose to vote it down. Nevertheless, if Albertans choose us to form the next government, we will take up this work again. Because race-based data will help us address the big picture and bring forward pieces like training and education for the public service, and ensure that our public sector workplaces are as diverse as the millions of Albertans that they serve. We must all work towards making Alberta a place where everyone can be successful. And we need the information on hand to help build that road to success. So that is the Alberta NDP's commitment to the Black community and to all Albertans. We are committed to being anti-racist and following through on all of the pieces we need to build a better future for all Albertans. And now, for more on that, I'd like to turn things over to our candidate from Edmonton-South, Rhiannon Hoyle.
Thank you, David. I am proud to be a part of the Alberta NDP's commitment to making Alberta a welcoming and inclusive place. One of the reasons I'm running for the Alberta NDP is to break down barriers. As a Black, multiracial, multicultural immigrant, it is not lost on me that we have an opportunity to move the needle forward by including diverse perspectives. It is only when we examine the root causes of the issues of racialized Albertans that they can face that we could even begin to make changes. To find the roots of issues, we need to know where to look. We need to be able to examine the practices and policies that affect us every day. Our systems, our institutions, our government works best when every person in the province can participate meaningfully and fully. However, many Albertans face multiple barriers, not just in our public services, but our democratic process. We can start the work to remove these barriers by improving access and increasing transparency. These policies help racialized Albertans build a sense of belonging and help people reach their full potential. This impacts our economy in driving innovation, our education system, and healthcare. When all Albertans are successful, we flourish together. We must work with post-secondary to develop and maintain programs that provide opportunities for racialized Albertans to gain experience in our systems and government. We must work with Indigenous, racialized, marginalized, and ethnocultural communities to develop community engagement programs so that all Albertans have the skills, knowledge, and opportunities to take part in making decisions for our province. These are just some of the key pieces to ensure Black Albertans and all racialized Albertans can participate in the progress and building of a better future for our province. I have focused on this as a community and business leader for decades, helping to develop programs to build resilient communities. I have learned that change is created through finding common ground, strong ties with community, and inclusive collaboration. I'm committed, along with my fellow Alberta NDP candidates, to this work when we form the next government. I would like to now turn things over to my fellow candidate, Sharif Haji.
Thank you, Rhiannon. I'm proud to stand with you and my fellow Alberta NDP candidates in our commitment to the Black community to develop this work. Combating all forms of racism means that we must wholly look into the practices that Albertans come into contact with every day as they build their futures here. My professional career has been centered around equity, which includes addressing racism and discrimination, and I'm very proud of the work that we have accomplished throughout my career, here in Alberta and across the globe, including my efforts on the global stage. Recently, I was at the United Nations to promote recognition, justice, and development for the people of African descent. It was what also led me to explore ways we can provide more opportunities for economic participation. Racialized Albertans need to have equitable access to social and economic skills and knowledge to participate in the economy, and that also must include inclusive workplaces. Some of the actions, this would be to reduce barriers for newcomers accessing newcomer support programs, such as increasing the number of high-level language training programs and enhancing resources for entrepreneurship. We can explore further leveraging the federal investments into providing more capital for racialized entrepreneurs and amplify similar programs across our beloved province. Such an immigrant entrepreneurship services through Business Link and the last Alberta NDP government bolstered and is still in effect today. I look forward to taking the next steps in actioning what the community has brought forward to my Alberta NDP colleagues. I look forward to working with communities so that they have the ownership over change and accountability from all of us. I look forward to forming the next government with the folks here and getting to work on building a better future. I now would like to turn things over to our leader and the next premier of this province, Rachel Notley.
Well, thank you so much, Sharif and Rhiannon. for sharing your thoughts, and of course to David for all of the work that you have put into the development of our anti-racism policies. As we celebrate Black History Month, we must be, and we are, committed to improving Black futures. And while I'm proud to have made some strides in our previous Alberta NDP government on this work, such as the official recognition of Black History Month in the province, what we are committed to for the future will be even more significant. With amazing candidates like we have here today, we will have the greatest number of Black MLAs in the legislature in Alberta's history. And beyond the legislature, we will work towards a public service that is as diverse as the province it serves. We will set future generations up for success by developing a modern and inclusive curriculum that all Alberta students can see themselves within. By strengthening the Human Rights Commission and by pledging more capital for racialized entrepreneurs and enhancing the federal government's current commitments. The work that David Shepherd, that also our critic for multiculturalism, Jasvir Diol, and members of the Alberta NDP did on the development of our anti-racism policy is utterly crucial to start taking these steps. And I want to thank each and every participant in those discussions for their important contribution. We're also committed that should we form the next NDP government, we'll pass legislation focused on anti-racism and race-based data collection and establish an anti-racism office and a commissioner to help identify and address racial inequalities in the province. Each and every Albertan deserves a kind, caring, and competent government. And that is what the Alberta NDP is offering to Albertans. Thank you. And any of us here are very happy to take questions that you may have.
Thank you, and we'll start with questions in the room. And seeing none, we'll go to questions on the phone. Just a reminder to press star 9 if you're joining us on the phone. Use the raise hand function if you're joining us via Zoom. And seeing none, that's all for today. Thank you. Oh, we've got some in the room. One second.
Thank you. My name is Tia Diemo. I represent Ladies Corner. We're a BIPOC publication. I'm just wondering how the NDP is polling in. I know you've got your star candidates here, Sharif and Rhiannon. It's polling in minority groups, in racialized communities. How your party is doing amongst Black women, maybe?
How we're doing which?
Would you know how your party is doing in racialized communities?
Oh, how we're polling, you're saying?
Yes.
Well, yeah, I mean, listen, I don't really want to get into speculating about how people will vote. I think that's their choice and that they will make on Election Day. But certainly we've been very focused on connecting with people in a range of minority communities, racialized communities across the province. Talking to folks about what their priorities are, meeting with them where they are about the kinds of issues that will impact how they vote, as well as that they see as being critical to their quality of life. And obviously, in many cases, there's, of course, overlap with all Albertans. But we also know folks are talking to us about the fact that discrimination and racism is real, and they need a government that acknowledges it and that will take concrete steps in multiple areas of our society to confront it and ultimately to eliminate it. And so it's through those conversations with a variety of communities that we have been able to, among other things, develop the plan that you can find at Alberta's Future around combating racism, and through which you can also find observations and commitments that we've made with respect to economic development as well as educational growth.
Yeah, Rachel, just a quick question. A key part of racism is systemic, and we have a serious problem with the recognition of foreign and credentials in Alberta. I didn't hear that in what you mentioned. How are you going to handle that? That's question one. Maybe I'll let you answer that first.
Well, so that is a very complex issue. We've been having meetings mostly post-COVID, with folks about the best ways to address the credentialing challenges, and we are committed to accelerating foreign credentialing in a whole bunch of different fields. We've been meeting people who've been, of course, victims of the problem. We know, of course, that the government has a role to play and that professional associations have a role to play. And we know that Alberta has a lot of ground to catch up on because we actually don't do this as well as other provinces, nor do we do it as well as other countries. So we are committed to looking at better models from across Canada as well as in other countries to make sure that folks who have good credentials from other settings are able to do the professional work they've been trained to do when they get here, because we need those folks to keep coming here. Already, our province has been built up by the incredible professionalism and expertise of new Canadians, and we need to make sure that those paths are even smoother for those folks to come here.
Ms. Notley, could I ask you a question around immigration as well? The use of English language for immigrants coming here, you find people from West Africa, for countries that speak English, and they still come here, they must take a use of English exam. What will your government do? Because these exams are expensive, it's $180, $450. I don't know if you've thought about it, you know, what would your government do to reduce this burden or hardship from immigrants coming from like India, Africa, who already speak English?
I think, you know, it's very true that those kinds of programs are the kinds of barriers that we are seeing have practical impacts on folks. And so what we'd like to do is two things. We want to make sure that the tests themselves are accessible and that people are not barred from them because of cost. And we also want to make sure that ELL training is available to everybody to ensure that they can be successful where it's needed. So we don't have adequate levels of ELL training right now, and we need to really grow that and then as well make that accessible as well.
Well, these people already speak English.
Again, I don't know the particular areas where they're being asked to take the courses, but obviously it needs to be equitably applied. Certainly not nationally. It shouldn't be on the basis of where you're coming from that requirement is applied. Did you have more you wanted to offer, David?
I could speak to this a bit.
Okay.
No, I appreciate that question, T, and I hear what you're saying, absolutely. There are standards in place, I think, that we do need to consider what the impacts are and how they are implemented. Indeed, we have folks that come to Canada for some countries they have studied and spoken English all of their lives. And certainly I think there's ways we can recognize and try to accommodate that. I've had the opportunity to join my colleague Christina Gray, our critic for labor immigration and some other areas, at some round tables where we're discussing these very issues. And I know that she is working towards some specific policy that we could look towards implementing and addressing these things. And so we'll have more opportunity, I imagine, in the weeks to come as we approach the election to get into some more of that detail, but it's something that we are very aware and alive to.
Thank you. I need one final question about Black Muslim women. What is your party going to do to prevent the violence that happens on a regular basis to our sisters, Black sisters?
I can say a little bit, and I don't know, Rhiannon, if you wanted to speak to some of this as well. Certainly, we've had the opportunity to have conversations with many women in the community who have seen this, who have experienced this in their community, from the Muslim community, and particularly Black Muslim women who wear hijab. And it is unacceptable. We cannot have people in our province fearing to just simply walk in the streets and to be able to go about their business in our community. Alberta needs to be a fully welcoming place. So as Rachel mentioned, I know we are exploring how we can further empower and support the Alberta Human Rights Council to be able to support community, to help address some of these issues. And certainly we are in support of the work that's being done towards a provincial Alberta Hate Crimes Unit. I believe there is a committee and there's some other work going on in that direction. I think that's something that we'd be looking to explore and enhance as well.
Sure, I'd love to say a few words on this. I think adding, further to that, and that's very important, it is absolutely an issue of a sense of belonging and how people transition into community. And so, earlier on when I spoke, I spoke about having those strong ties with community. I think the challenge here is making sure, especially when we're talking about our Black sisters, especially hijab wearing, and this goes into if you speak a different language as well, how are we creating an environment for when folks come here, and that transition piece and how they can learn about our government systems, the systems that they would need in social service programs. So I think there's some good policy that can be done on that. And as you've heard both from our leader and Dave Shepherd and Sharif, there's a lot of work, and you've got all of us here and the rest of the candidates and MLAs that are ready to do this work, especially if we become government.
Yeah, last question, which will be...
Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah, please.
Okay. So my last question is, you have been a premier before, Rishi, and now you are seeking for another term. What are you going to do different, especially with respect to multicultural communities?
Well, that's a big question, but I think what we want to do, we, in the latter part of our term, establish a Premier's Advisory Council on anti-racism. And as you know, that council did manage to deliver a report with a series of recommendations to the former Premier, the one who followed me, Premier Kenny. And unfortunately, that report was essentially then put aside to someone else's desk where it is currently gathering dust. So there were a lot of good recommendations from that proposal that we will move forward on, not to mention the proposals that exist and some of the ideas that have been discussed in our What We Heard document around combating racism that you can find at albertasfuture.ca. But essentially, some of the things that are a big priority for me, like we had started talking about the need to amend our curriculum so that we are combating racism in every grade consistently, repeatedly throughout our whole K-12 system, and that we are promoting inclusion and knowledge, cultural knowledge about each other within our education system to do the very things that Rhiannon was talking about, in terms of ensuring that we have a sense of community as opposed to a sense of division between different groups, and we have a knowledge about those communities as opposed to a fear of those communities. And so that's where, to me, education is a key point. The other area that we are really going to focus on, of course, is the justice area. David talked about the hate crimes unit. I think that we need to move, very ambitiously on that with respect to educating law enforcement officials, both in terms of those who are on the street as well as those who are in our courts. And I think that's also another critical object that we need to pursue. And then, of course, we'll continue engaging with folks within the community to look at their priorities. And of course, again, I ask people to take a look at our What We Heard document, because there's probably about total of 20 ideas and recommendations in there that we're very interested in learning more about and pursuing.
So we do have some questions on the phone. We'll go to those. If you can say your name and your outlet at the top, we'll go to our first caller.
Good morning, Rachel. It's Dean from CP. Once again, hope that you can hear me.
Yep.
Okay. I'm wondering if you can if you can respond to this controversy over Frances Willison's. She's supposed to speak at the U of L tomorrow. Says she's going to show up there no matter what, even though they've asked her not. They're not going to give her space. What do you think about the controversy? Should she be allowed to speak? And what do you think about the Advanced Ed Minister now saying, in light of this, we're going to have new steps to, quote, strengthen free speech on campuses?
Well, I'm very troubled that is the position that's been taken by the Minister of Advanced Education. When we were government, we committed to acting on the principles and the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, as well as the principles around UNDRIP. And as far as I'm concerned, the idea of having someone come and speak at the university, particularly in Lethbridge, to a student body that consists of many Indigenous students about how they somehow benefited from residential schools is deeply troubling to me. That is deeply hurtful communication, and as a result of that, I believe that it would be an exception to free speech principles, and that the UCP doesn't understand how incredibly hurtful those ideas are to huge swaths of the Alberta population reveals their lack of understanding about the real experiences and traumas that Treaty people in Alberta have been subjected to over centuries.
Any follow-up, Dean?
Yes. So one other thing that this professor has been criticized for, of course, was calling out the Black Lives Matter movement. What do you think? Should the province be doing some more, given that she wants to make this speech on February 1st from a professor that's has a problem with the Black Lives Matter movement?
Well, thank you for pointing that out, Dean, because I hadn't realized that it was February 1st on the eve of Black History Month, and the irony and the hypocrisy, quite honestly, of the provincial government in taking action to give her a forum to attack the efforts of folks who are seeking to promote equity and fairness for Black Albertans on the very day that Black History Month is commencing. That's a real problem for me. Black History Month is important, but it's not just about standing around and thoughtfully considering things that happened in the past. It's about taking action to ensure equity, to ensure freedom from discrimination, to acknowledge that discrimination is real and continues, and to take action to eliminate it. And promoting someone who wants to come into our public institutions and attack those who are advocating on behalf of anti-racism is the opposite of being anti-racist. And I would argue that the Minister of Advanced Education should reconsider his position on this matter.
We'll go to our next caller.
Hi there, it's Catherine Yurkowski with Alberta Today. You'd mentioned that one of your plans is to appoint an anti-racism commissioner, and I was hoping to get some more details on who that's for. Is it specifically for government employees or agencies, or is it anybody within the province who has a problem with racism come to? What exactly does that look like?
Well, obviously, we already have a Human Rights Commission, which is designed to protect and to protect people from discrimination in Alberta and to advance equity for folks across Alberta. So that's the role of the Human Rights Commission. So one of the things, of course, that we've talked about is ensuring that we add resources to the Human Rights Commission so they can do that work more fully. Within the public sector, though, not only those directly employed in the public sector, but public sector agencies, like, for instance, Alberta Health Services, as well as agencies, boards, and commissions as a whole, we can take action to ensure that racialized Albertans are fairly getting opportunities to them. And the first, as well as in terms of the services that are provided through those government services, like health, like economic development support, like child protection. There's a whole range of things. And so we need to understand the way we provide those services to ensure that we are doing it in a way that supports different communities, racialized communities, as opposed to systemically discriminates against them. And it's because of this that provinces around this country have commenced taking race-based data. Alberta is kind of late to the game on this. And that's why we were rather disappointed to see the UCP vote down this initiative, because this is about knowing how we're doing and keeping track of where there are problem areas so that a commissioner could then dig in. And so it would be about keeping the public service and that over which the government has direct control accountable, both in terms of our hiring as well as in terms of our service providing.
Well, good. Any follow-up, Catherine?
Yes. And I was wondering more broadly, one of the things we see when people begin to speak out about social justice issue, there tends to be a backlash, as we saw. Dean gave the example of this university professor who said Black Lives Matter was destroying her university. When people tend to speak out, there's a backlash, often violent. And I'm wondering what do you see as your role as opposition or potentially in government in combating this sort of growing backlash?
Mm-hmm. Well, you listen, I think that within reason, political debate and disagreement is completely appropriate and should always happen. That's what strengthens our democracy. However, when that level of debate and disagreement is taken to levels of being threatening, or being damaging, being designed to hurt folks or to withhold benefits or opportunities from folks on the very basis of their status as a member of a minority, well, then you have a problem. And when it comes to particular public institutions, I think these institutions should lead, they should not follow. And so we have an opportunity in certain institutions to do just that. And this is about equity and equality. It's not about anything other than that. And we all understand that when it comes to understanding issues of equity and equality and a fair access to the resources that we all benefit, regardless of the way you're defining them, that there are systemic barriers to that fair access. And pretending that those systemic barriers don't exist or demonizing conversations about those systemic barriers is not something that we should be endorsing within the public sector or through any public institutions.
We'll go to our next caller.
Hi, it's Lisa Johnson from the Edmonton Journal. I just wanted to follow up on one of Catherine's questions. We've obviously seen the Alberta Anti-Racism Advisory Council offer a slew of recommendations, including to the public service in education and health and law enforcement. How exactly would this office and commissioner differ from the mandate of the Advisory Council?
Well, in fact, I think that the Office of the Commissioner would help operationalize some of the recommendations of that council. So it's sort of the next step flowing from those recommendations to actually make them, put them into place in practice. So the fact of the matter is that council made a series of recommendations and the provincial government has for the most part ignored them. And so what we're talking about is how do we take those recommendations and rather than just sort of restating aspirational principles year over year after year after year with no measurable outcome, how do we actually start putting into place measurable progress? And so both David's proposed bill for keeping track of disaggregated race-based data, as well as the idea of bringing in a public service commissioner to track and take action on what that data tells us, is sort of the next step from some of those recommendations that were made by the Premier's Council on Anti-Racism.
Any follow-up, Lisa?
No, thank you very much.
And we've got time for one more in the room.
Hi, my name is Dunya Nur, and I just had a quick question. If elected, what are some of the commitments that your government is willing to make around the crisis around opioids and also the issues around houselessness? One thing I could say working in the sector of social services and social work is that mass incarceration and punitive punishment does not heal, does not help, but rather harms a community that's already psychologically going through a lot of vicarious trauma. So I was just wondering what you have for that area in terms of planning.
Was that there's broad range of actions that a provincial government can take to start combating the many challenges that you described there. Obviously, we need to increase our investment in housing, affordable housing, also shelter housing, and wraparound services for that housing. So that's a key piece. We know that houselessness has grown tremendously under this UCP government, in part because they have eliminated a rent supplement that has thrown thousands and thousands of thousands of people who were in homes out of their homes. So that's a problem. We also need to ensure that we're providing more mental health services and counseling health services without the barrier of cost, and we have already put forward a proposal to do that for all Albertans in terms of giving them free access to mental health counseling. In addition, we agree with some of what the UCP has done in terms of increasing investment in addiction recovery, but we also believe that there are many elements to combating the scourge of addiction and keeping people who suffer from that illness alive. And so we need to give a full range of support in that area, and we need to do it very ambitiously because it is a growing problem. And ultimately, those things combined with ensuring that we basically combat the basics of poverty. We are in a province where the very modest income supports that were provided to folks on the edge of poverty were frozen for 4 years, right after the government promised that they would not do that. And by doing that, you take people who are on the brink of crisis or in low-grade crisis, and you create explosive crisis, and that's what has happened. So that's not even all of the things that we need to do. We know there are many other pieces to this, but overall, my values are this, that we measure our health as a community by how we care for those among us who are most vulnerable. And by that measure, I would argue we haven't been doing very well over the last 4 years, and we can do far better.
And that's all for today. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. That's all on.